Before 2011, Atlus hadn't released a game on an HD console. Even after the 360 and PS3 were well established, the studio kept their games like the Persona series on older systems and handhelds. Persona 4's success put a spotlight on Atlus and its development team. Fans expected a direct sequel, but director Katsura Hashino and his crew had a different plan. They chose a new project that would push Atlus into HD and set the stage for Persona 5. Howdy everyone, Twigs here again. Today, we're talking about Atlus's first HD title, Catherine. Instead of rushing into a Persona 4 sequel, Hashino and his team took a risk with something fresh. We'll look at how Catherine came together, the creative choices behind it, and how those decisions led into Persona 5. We'll also talk about the expanded re-release, Catherine Full Body. So sit back, grab your drink and Catherine of choice, and meet me at the Stray Sheep as we cover the development of Catherine. In a 2018 Dengeki PlayStation interview, Hashino explained that there was pressure at Atlus for his team to move straight into the next Persona game. The team, however, had no experience developing for the PS3 or 360. Hashino felt they needed to make a different project first. This project would serve as a test, letting the team practice with HD characters and create full scenes on new hardware. While the Persona team felt it was important for them to continue their work on the Persona series, they believed continuing only with the same series could weigh down their creativity. Before tackling another RPG, they wanted to try something different, something that broke them out of a single genre. By working on a completely new type of game, Hashino felt they could highlight what worked in Persona while also identifying areas that needed improvement. Hashino shared, "We are not just making it for our own self-relief, of course. Catherine is our first project on HD consoles, and our first with a game system that isn't an RPG. By making it, we could inspire ourselves with a variety of challenges we never encountered before. I am confident that it will be very helpful when we make our next games that everyone are looking forward to." Up to that point, Hashino did most of his work on Persona, a series designed to resonate with younger players. When he turned 30, he began to wonder if there were games he could personally relate to in the same way. In a 2011 interview with Dengeki PlayStation, he said, "If we look at TV and movies, we find many works that depict adult life faithfully. But in video games, once you reach those bewildering 30s and 40s, you can't succeed by giving your characters a sword to wield anymore, but must show the struggles of adult life in order to have your players identify with the characters." For their first HD project, the Persona team decided to create an adult-focused game outside of the RPG genre and push themselves in new directions. With Hashino leading, series veteran Shigenori Sojima took on art direction and Shoji Meguro composed the soundtrack. Hashino revealed in a 2010 issue of Famitsu 360 that Catherine's development began even before the team finished Persona 4. He recalled how the team switched between polishing Persona 4 and starting the early stages of Catherine. At first, Hashino wrote the scenario on his own. As development moved forward, more staff joined to shape the story. During this stage, the themes and narrative went through several rewrites. The original concept focused on war, with the idea being the nightmares of soldiers in the battlefield between one battle and the next. After further discussion, the team decided this direction wasn't relatable. Most adults don't share the experience of being a soldier. With the Persona series, the protagonist is a high school student, which works because most players can connect with that stage of life. They needed a theme that could connect with adults in the same way Persona connected with younger players. Hashino explained that by the time people reach their 30s and 40s, shared experiences become harder to pin down because lifestyles and careers branch in different directions. However, the one constant is love, especially love and the struggles of marriage. Hashino said, "If you're an adult, it's most likely a large part of life around you." In addition, while love is a popular theme in movies and TV shows, there aren't many games that tackled adult love issues in a serious manner, so we thought it would be interesting. For the central setting, Hashino wanted a place adults could commonly gather. He chose a bar and named it the Stray Sheep. I'm sure there are people out there who are of a more outdoors type, but I think the general tendency is to go and have a drink after work and on weekends. We decided to go for the atmosphere of a bar at the corner of a town, which you go to see who's around when it's too boring to just go home after work. The game took place in an unnamed American city, but still included Japanese influences. The art book Venus mode, along with one of the game's endings, later confirmed the setting as an American space colony. Catherine Full Body expanded on this, naming the colony Neo Brooklyn. The team built the story around love, focusing specifically on a love triangle. They wanted it to feel grounded, like something you might read about on internet forums or in advice books. Unlike typical romance games where the goal is to win someone over, Catherine tells a story that begins after the relationship is already established. The developers also put effort into making the game resonate with female players, drawing on feedback and experiences from women on the team. Hashino explained in a 2011 interview with Dengeki Games that compared to Western titles, most Japanese games feature teens or young boys as protagonists. He believed this came from a cultural idea that adult life was boring and that youth deserved reverence. Still, he felt this trend was changing. The dreams of people who grew up in the Famicom era were always influenced by the games they played, and a lot of them continue to enjoy games to this day. In a way, these 30 and 40-year-olds are also winning in life. Even in their old age, they still have a lot of fun playing a load of games. With that in mind, he chose to make the protagonist an adult who older players could connect with. Since the main character was close to his own age, Hashino added references that adults in his generation would recognize. For example, the game is presented as an episode of a fictional TV show called The Golden Playhouse, modeled after a Japanese program from the 70s and 80s called the Golden Western Theater. When asked about having an adult as the protagonist, Hashino said, "When you become an adult, your time becomes limited and your actions are mostly influenced by whether they're advantageous to you or not. I want to create a game that makes you notice the unusual and hazy things in the world." Unlike the self-insert leads in Persona, this protagonist would have his own identity. Vincent was written as a defined character, with players watching his story unfold. Hashino explained, "When you're drinking with friends, it's fun to hear about someone's scene of carnage at home after his infidelity was exposed, isn't it? Because it happened to someone else," he laughs. It's kind of a popular story. Another big reason Vincent wasn't written as a self-insert is that surveys at the time showed many players disliked games with a central love theme. Most preferred pure fantasy instead. By giving Vincent his own character, the player could sit back and watch the story unfold, Hashino explained. That said, I don't think this is a game that requires you to search for its deep meaning. We tell the story in a light, fantastic way. This is not a simulator. In addition, you can enjoy the game parts even if you ignore all the love talk, so I think even those people can be satisfied with the game. Hashino described Catherine as ambitious and said only Atlus would have agreed to let him make it. In a 2010 interview with Dengeki PlayStation, he recalled how the design team filled their pitch documents with intense visuals to show the game's appeal. He didn't explain what they were in that interview, though he did mention one included Persona 4's Yukiko. The team ultimately titled the game Catherine after its female leads. The name gave it a horror movie edge, inspired by films like Carrie. With the game's scenario and themes in place, the team aimed to place an emphasis on creating a deep experience with lots of gameplay for players to sink their teeth into. The team wanted to test their storytelling know-how and decided on puzzle action gameplay to challenge themselves. The foundation for the puzzle action gameplay used in Catherine was actually created long before development started. Hashino shared with Dengeki Games that it was commonplace for the development team to create smaller projects on their own when they were done with larger ones. One of these small projects would serve as the basis for Catherine's gameplay. Hashino shared that he and one other programmer created the puzzle action gameplay during one of these periods. Even though we are mostly involved with RPG projects, from time to time, ideas that can't be used in an RPG come flashing inside of our heads. This time as well, I took one of those ideas and made one of our new programmers make it under the pretense of development training. Hashino recalls that due to hardware limitations at the time, the small project was difficult to move in 3D. Since the game would have had to be in 2D and he had no story to pair with it, he shelved the idea. However, the team would revisit this idea when development of Catherine started, and thought it would merge well with the world they were making. While rough around the edges, using this idea as the base for the game allowed them to focus on other aspects, such as the game's scenes and learning how to program for HD consoles. To put it simply, Catherine's puzzle gameplay involves the player controlling Vincent to climb a tower by pushing and pulling blocks. When work started on the gameplay, Hashino said that the placement of the blocks in the levels were randomly placed, so there was no one correct solution to the puzzle. While the team liked the trial and error style gameplay this provides, they saw that some players just could not complete it. The team felt they were doing a disservice to the story if the only way some players could see the ending was to look it up on YouTube. So, they remade the level so that there was at least one solution so that players could advance the story and finish the game. An easy difficulty was also added so that anyone can clear it. Hashino added that there isn't a single way to play the game, and that he looks forward to seeing how highly skilled players find solutions to the puzzles that the development team didn't even think of. He also felt that the gameplay was indispensable to the story, and gave the game its own unique taste. Shigenori Sojima would serve as Catherine's art director. Sojima shared in a blog post in 2010 that since Catherine was their first HD non-RPG game, it challenged him in many different aspects. He wanted each character to have personal qualities that would make the player think there are similar types of people in real life. Sojima shared that he made a lot of mistakes when trying to portray characters as serious or comical, so he put a lot of work into their emotional expression. Much like Persona titles, Catherine would have a central color as well. The color pink would be chosen. This was done to convey the game's sensuality and kitschy atmosphere. Sojima wanted players to look out for daring and audacious visualizations, like one would find in mangas. When talking about his art for Catherine, Sojima said, "You can probably tell this just by looking at it, but it's it's quite erotic. It's very much different from the pure Persona, but this is a necessity. It's an element that cannot be done away with if you want to realistically portray adult love. If you omit it because it's a consumer game, it's unnatural. So, we are challenging the limits. There, my excuse has come to an end," he laughed. The protagonist, Vincent, was designed and named after the actor Vincent Gallo from his movie Buffalo 66. Hashino shared that they wanted the protagonist to be a really cool character, and they thought of both Gallo and actor Paul Newman. However, they thought Newman was too old, so they modeled the bar's owner after him and went with Gallo for Vincent. They decided they wanted Vincent to have a cool bum feel to him, while making him handsome since they thought no one would buy the game if he was ugly. Hashino said, "He's an indecisive type who can't make up his mind. But in his own way, he's a man who faces whatever is in front of him and does his best. It makes it easy for players to project themselves into him." Hashino relied heavily on female staff members when rounding out Vincent's character. When the script was done, he would let female staffers read it and have them point out problems they saw with Vincent, and the team would make adjustments based on what they said. To Hashino's surprise, most of the feedback he was given was in regards to trivial things that Vincent said, with many of the female staffers saying that this is what impacted them the most. Hashino stated, "But when we asked them if they can forgive Vincent for cheating, they said, 'When all is said and done, when he cheats, it's impossible,'" he laughed. "We managed to make him a more rounded character than he was previously, but not to the point where he can be forgiven for infidelity." The game's two Catherines were designed to be total opposites from each other. Sojima said that once character personalities were decided, designing their appearances was easy. C. Catherine was drawn to be, quote, "younger and healthier," and written in a way that you can't help but feel a delusional attraction to her. She was designed to have a hard-to-describe appeal, and who was the type who could easily start up a conversation with older men. Catherine's design was also influenced by Buffalo 66, with her outfit and makeup being influenced by the character played by Christina Ricci. Sojima shared in a 2018 interview with the YouTube channel Archipel that he ultimately designed Catherine to be more in a manga tone away from reality. Catherine would end up being particularly difficult to convert into 3D, and Sojima would make adjustments to her design up until the end of development. On the opposite end, Sojima designed K. Catherine, who I will refer to as K for the rest of the video, to be as realistic as possible. He stated he had to start over with her design many times to get it right. He wanted her to have an adult charm that would remind the player of reality, being tender while having strict features. Sojima designed her makeup to be more cool than hot, and used thin glasses to give her a more intimidating look. Hashino said that Kei was designed to be someone who is hardworking and a beauty that makes other men jealous. He also wanted her and Vincent's relationship to be a love-hate unbreakable relationship. Hashino said, "When strangers look at them, they think, 'Why isn't he marrying this beauty?' But after they speak to her, they realize she's hard to deal with," he laughed. "She's a character that reflects that kind of story." Vincent's friends were inspired by a wedding rage movement that was happening in Japan at the time. Hashino shared that during writing, there was a lot of criticism around a large group of men who did not want to settle down, but suddenly he recalled that it was like the whole country suddenly said, "Let's get married." During this time, magazines would interview men who had no interest in relationships, and Hashino felt he put these types of people around Vincent. Hashino also shared that he named Vincent's friends after Hollywood pretty boys, Johnny Depp, Orlando Bloom, and Tobey Maguire. Catherine would also see the use of animated cutscenes to help tell the game's story. The Persona series up to that point had also used animated cutscenes. However, Catherine would contain more scenes than any Persona game up to that point. these scenes would be made in about a year by Studio 4C. When it came to the game's cover art, Hashino and Sojima shared insight in a 2011 interview with Famitsu on why the game has different artwork for each of the game's versions. To put it simply, they both thought it would be interesting if the 360 and PS3 had different covers. Their idea was for both Catherines to be the focus on their own box in order to treat the two characters equally. Hashino gave Sojima free rein to design the covers however he liked, only asking him that the covers catch the attention of would-be consumers. Sojima shared that he wanted both characters to have the same amount of appeal on the covers. However, he felt this could be challenging since the younger Catherine had more sex appeal than the older Catherine. His first idea was to have both Catherines be almost nude making the same pose. However, they felt that the younger Catherine would be more popular than the older Catherine. Another early idea was to have Catherine holding a knife and Kay holding a fork. Sojima would draw both girls in a variety of poses and print them out. He then would place them on the game's packaging, make changes, then repeat the process until he had the covers he wanted. He recalls that he would have to redraw the art a few times, as Hashino thought it wasn't revealing enough. For example, for the 360 package, Hashino wanted Kay's shirt to be falling as Vincent climbed it. Although the translator of this Famitsu interview couldn't tell if Hashino was joking or not, Hashino said that most men can be split into quote, ass types and breast types, so they used poses that emphasize these areas in order to bring out Catherine's youthfulness and Kay's quote, motherliness. On a humorous note, after Hashino said this, the Famitsu interviewer asked the two which type they are. Hashino quickly said that he has no preference, and he said that he only brought it up in regards to the packaging. Sojima then added that he was an ass man himself. When making the final choice of which Catherine to place on what system's art, the Famitsu interviewer asked if Kay was used for the 360 because that system had a more adult fanbase. Hashino thought Sojima made the choice based on the shape of the boxes. However, Sojima said that he simply made the decision and didn't remember struggling with the choice. Lastly, the game's soundtrack was created by Shoji Meguro. In the soundtrack commentary, Meguro stated he started work in August of 2009 and was assisted by Kenichi Tsuchiya, Atsushi Kitajo, and Toshiki Konishi. Rapper L Vocal would also write music for the game. Normally when Meguro wrote music for the Persona series, Hashino would usually give him creative freedom to do as he liked, with only a few directions here and there. However, for Catherine, Meguro said that Hashino was taking particular care with this game and would give him very precise orders for the game's music. Meguro would admit that this would cause him some difficulty throughout development. Meguro would describe the music as classic, adult-oriented, and erotic, and he would use a variety of music for the game's soundtrack, such as jazz and classical music. Catherine would be announced in August of 2010 in the Japanese gaming magazine Famitsu. The announcement said that Atlus's first HD game would be multi-platform, and the Persona team wanted to try their hand at something new before making an RPG. The article also detailed the game's story, visuals, and a release date for the upcoming winter in Japan. In a later interview that same month, Hashino shared that they decided to make Catherine for home consoles rather than handhelds, since he felt the game would lose its charm on mobile devices. However, developing for the PS3 and 360 proved to cause some issues. The team had trouble debugging the game between two different platforms, which did cause some scheduling backtracks. In a 2010 Dengeki PlayStation interview with Hashino, he said that the initial interest after Catherine's announcement was very high, stating that the online traffic to the game's website was the same amount as when they announced a Persona title. Hashino stated he does have some worry that the game won't be accepted by some players. However, he is confident in the game itself. He would also share in a blog post that Atlus would aggressively advertise the game in Japan. The game's box art would be used for promotional posters in stores, as well as Atlus providing a cropped version of it for stores that wanted something less risque. In late January 2011, a demo for Catherine would be released. However, the demo would end up being pulled in February due to it reaching the maximum number of downloads. Catherine was released in Japan on February 17, 2011 for the Xbox 360 and PS3. The game sold 163,762 copies in Japan in its first week across both platforms. The game would quickly become known for its difficulty, with Atlus sending out a patch to adjust it. This patch would add a super easy mode that would allow players to collect a drink that let Vincent jump multiple blocks and give the players more retries per pillow item. In 2018, Hashino would share that the game took them much longer than expected to develop, and that narrowing down the game's difficulty was the greatest challenge. He admitted that he made the game too difficult to begin with, and had to adjust it many times since more people who normally don't play games were playing it. Shortly after the game's release in Japan, Atlus would state that there were no plans at the moment to bring the game to North America. However, not even a month later, leaks would come out of EB Games and GameStop that stated a North American version was coming later that year. Atlus would finally confirm that Catherine was coming to NA for a summer release. A few days before the North American release, Kodawari.com would share an interview with Atlus USA's PR manager Aram Jabari and localization editors Mike Meeker and Clayton Chan over the English localization process for Catherine. Meeker and Chan shared that Catherine didn't have to be toned down in any way to be more appropriate for a Western audience. Jabari shared in a different interview with PlayStation Blog that since the game was already set in the US, the developers put in a lot of work to make it feel authentic. So the localization team didn't have to do a lot for adjusting for an American audience. Meeker stated that the biggest challenge the localization team faced was actually around the quotes used in the game's loading screens. He explained that the team was handed a very large text file in Japanese and was told that it was all famous quotes. However, none of them were attributed. The team would ultimately decide to scrap them after a few days of working on it and would place in new quotes instead. Jabari would add that the localizers had challenges with the realness of the dialogue. He recalls the team saying, "It's not translating the definition, it's translating the intent." Jabari would say, "The characters' interactions with each other. Some of it is tongue-in-cheek, but most of it is supposed to be real human interaction. And there's some dialogue things that will come up, including references and jokes, so our localizers go the extra mile." The game would be fully dubbed in English as well. The game's English voice director, Valerie Aram, stated that in order to make the English dialogue look normal, Atlus would reanimate the characters' lips in certain scenes. With Catherine being a very adult-themed game, some retailers like Target and Walmart were not interested in selling it since they thought Catherine was an explicit sex game based on the game's cover art. In a 2013 article on Kotaku, Jason Schreier met with Atlus USA and shared how they overcame this obstacle. Atlus would compile explicit scenes, like shower and sex scenes, from games that the stores were currently selling. They would then get Jabari to narrate the video describing each scene, with him saying, "That's not in Catherine," after each one. After all the scenes were shown, they played a reel of Catherine's most explicit scenes while explaining that the game wasn't as graphic as some of the games they were already selling. Atlus would meet with these retailers to show them this reel that they had made and convince these big stores to carry the game. Jabari would also confirm that North America would receive modified cover art for certain markets as well. Catherine would be released on July 26, 2011 in North America. Atlus would share a photo of a cake that said that they had sold 200,000 copies in its first week. However, this would be the number of games shipped, with an actual 78,000 copies being sold in the first week. Catherine was met with positive reviews across both versions of the game in North America and Japan. The game was given a lot of praise towards its more adult themes, with a lot of reviewers noting the game's puzzle difficulty. IGN wrote that while Catherine's difficulty will turn off some players, wanting to see how the plot progresses will have you trying the puzzles over and over. Ryan Taujanik of Games Radar wrote, "Perhaps the game's greatest strength lies in its adult themes. Not its occasional sexual implications, but instead its ability to confront the real life, this ain't always easy world of relationships." Jeremy Parrish of OneUp.com also praised the game's themes and noted its difficulty. Parrish would go on to criticize the karma meter that is affected by the player's actions as Vincent. He said, "Sadly, any illusion of real interaction is shattered by the way the karma meter pops up after every dialogue choice. Not only does it remind you that your actions ultimately reduce down to simple, binary opposites, but reconciling with Catherine is represented by a blue cherub, while pursuing Catherine is denoted by a little red devil. Nothing like seeing the game's moral biases displayed front and center." Some were critical of the game's portrayal of male and female relationships. Emily Short, in a 2011 article on Gamasutra, wrote that the relationships shown were both misogynist and misandrous, writing, "It's the basis for a load of messaging to women to the effect that expressing what you want is bad, that marriage is something you trick men into, and that it's vital to hurry up and get hitched before the fertile years are gone. To men, that adult responsibilities, whether via marriage or otherwise, are constricting and destructive, and that you need to get all your living in before you tie the knot." There was also some online controversy around the character Erica and Vincent's dialogue with her. Erica is a supporting character who is a trans woman, and she will have conversations with Vincent throughout the game. However, Vincent will make remarks invalidating Erica's gender identity, such as, "I'd be more convinced if a woman was telling me this." Atlus USA PR manager at the time, Jonathan Stiebel, would comment on IGN on the matter, stating, "I don't think we're supposed to identify with Vincent. I think we're just supposed to kind of be confused by the way that he thinks. It's frustrating for a main character that you control. Just like, please get your life together, Vincent." Erica would also be listed with her previous name in the credits of the game. Atlus would fix this and other issues for the North American release of Catherine Full Body. Hashino was surprised to see that more female players were playing Catherine when compared to other Atlus games, as well as the game's popularity overseas. Out of this popularity, the start of a competitive Catherine scene would be born. There is a great video on YouTube by the channel Action that covers how Catherine esports came to be that I will link in the description. I'll briefly touch on competitive Catherine here, but definitely check out Action's video if you want to know more. While Catherine did not have online multiplayer, a small group of players in Northern California's fighting game community would use the game's versus mode to start playing. Over time, rivalries would form, and the popularity for the game would grow as well. Competitive fighting game player Dacidbro would be a leading supporter for Catherine, using his connections in the fighting game community to spread its popularity and getting the game accepted as side events at local tournaments. With many players feeling that the game's versus mode shared many elements with fighting games. In 2015, Atlus would take notice, and then Atlus PR manager John Harden would help bring the game to EVO as a side tournament held at the Atlus booth. The game would return to EVO in 2016, as well as see an influx of new players as more tournaments were held and competitive players from other games would join in. Lastly, in 2019, Atlus would port the game, now dubbed Catherine Classic, via Steam, making it the first modern Atlus game to be on PC. Catherine Classic would support an unlocked frame rate at 4K, as well as giving the player the option to choose between English or Japanese voice acting. By 2017, Catherine sold over 1 million copies worldwide, and in 2019, the game would receive the same treatment as Persona games and get an enhanced re-release. Called Catherine Full Body, this game would be the first game made by the newly formed Studio Zero, a subsidiary of Atlus that Hashino founded in 2016. The term full body is used when describing some wines. The team wanted full body to symbolize a richer experience for the game. For this re-release, Hashino would serve as producer while Kenichi Goto would be the director. Hashino shared in a 2018 Dengeki PlayStation interview that he felt that love and the way people live their lives have become more diverse since the original game's release. He then thought that the love that was depicted in Catherine could be more diverse too, so he wanted to update the game for a current era. In a separate Famitsu article, Hashino said that Full Body would be the complete version of the game, and that it can be released since values have diversified since the original. Catherine Full Body would be announced in 2017 for the PS4 and PS Vita in Japan, with a Western release being planned as well. The game would be ported over to the engine used for Persona 5, and would add new content like gameplay changes, new endings, and 20+ animated cutscenes. Probably the most well-known addition to Full Body would be the addition of a third love interest the player could choose from, Rin, short for Catherine? Since the original game had only 2 girls to choose from, Hashino wanted to give the player even more to think about in Full Body, so he added Rin. He said, by adding Rin, new values and thoughts will emerge within the 2 Catherines. When compared to the original Catherines, Hashino thought it would be good for the player to have a soothing presence who will listen to what you have to say, and Rin would fulfill this role. When it was decided to add a third Catherine to the game, Sojima wondered what kind of character would work best. Since the 2 Catherines were designed to be total opposites to each other, he wondered how to bring in a third that would make sense to this dynamic. He finally landed on making this third Catherine a cute character, since the other girls were a hot and cool character. The game's puzzle gameplay would also undergo some changes. Goto would state that they saw that there were many people who liked the original game's puzzle segments, and many that thought it was difficult. For players who liked them, a new mode called Remix Mode was added, which would bring additional gimmicks to the stages. They hoped this would allow players to approach the puzzle stages in a new and different way. For players who thought the game was difficult or just didn't like the puzzles, a new safety mode was added, allowing the player to complete the stages without failing. This mode would also give the player the option to outright skip the puzzles entirely and just move on to the next story sequence. Also new to Full Body would be the addition of online versus play, inspired by the popularity of the game's competitive scene, with various adjustments made to the gameplay. Hashino shared that he was surprised at the overseas competitive scene for the game. He recalls his time at EVO and actually becoming concerned with how plain the screen looks during the gameplay. This led him to add things such as victory poses to make it more interesting to look at. Sound production for Full Body would be handled by the company Inspion. In an interview with Game Business, Atlus's Kenichi Tsuchiya, who created the sound effects in the original game, explained that normally Atlus creates all sound in-house. However, due to the newly formed Studio Zero being at limited capacity and the urge to test collaboration with other creators for potential larger scale projects led Atlus to ask Inspion for help. Tsuchiya said that while Atlus gave Inspion all the sound data for the original game, they wanted them to completely remake the sound for Full Body. He felt this let him see the game's sounds be given a new interpretation while improving its quality as well. Inspion would refine the game's sound effects by adding new sounds to them and adjusting their quality. They would also write 17 new tracks for the game. There would be new DLC Japanese voiceovers done for the younger Catherine as well. Each voice would portray her in a different personality with 11 different voiceovers to choose from. Hashino was the one who proposed this idea to Goto, saying, "I thought it would be around 3 or 4 people, but to think it would be 11 people was a bit beyond my imagination," he laughs. There would also be DLC that would add Joker from Persona 5 to the game's Babel and Coliseum modes. In 2019, Sega of America Communications Manager Jonathan Stiebel would share some insight over the game's localization in a PlayStation blog post. The localization team took great care adjusting the game's script for the English release. The original Japanese script was heavily rewritten for Full Body, with 60% more content added to the game that the team had to work through. Stiebel explained, "Our team went back and painstakingly referenced the Japanese script alongside the original English translation to ensure that lines were still accurate for pre-existing content, while translating and editing entirely new corpuses of text for new content in Full Body." As for the English dub, the production team worked hard to bring back every English voice actor to reprise the roles for Full Body. Stiebel said this is in order to preserve the integrity of Catherine Full Body's English voiceover. Catherine Full Body released on February 14th, 2019 in Japan for the PS4 and PS Vita, and worldwide on September 3rd, 2019 for the PS4. A Nintendo Switch port of the game would later be released in 2020. Atlus consumer software lead, Naoto Hiraoka, shared with Famitsu that while Catherine was well received and succeeded in giving the company confidence for their future titles, Catherine proved to be a difficult game to make. So much so that the game would not receive any spin-offs or anime adaptations. Despite this, Catherine would still see some related media and collaborations as well. The game would see a novel adaptation in 2011 by Ryo Kawakami for Japan, simply titled Catherine the Novel. This novel would retell the main plot of the game while showing the different perspectives of several other characters besides Vincent. The novel would also have its own exclusive ending. A second novel released in 2011 titled Catherine, The Mysterious Tale of Rapunzel by Kazuaki Imoto would be set as a prequel to the main game with a new cast and plot. Both of these novels would see English fan translations online. Japan would also receive a manga titled Catherine Full Body, Side Story of K, which followed, like the title suggests, side stories of K throughout the events of Full Body. The PSP game Persona 3 Portable briefly features Vincent in Club Escapade, where he mentions nightmares when spoken to. Persona 5 would see costumes for the Phantom Thieves based on Catherine's characters, and in 2019, Catherine would have a collab with the mobile game Destiny Child. Lastly, in 2019, the music from the game would be performed live during Catherine Full Body Symphonic Concert in Tokyo. Though Catherine was tougher to create than originally planned, it was exactly what Hashino and his team needed in order to challenge themselves for the future. The team's time and care spent on this title would not only pave the way for the eventual Persona 5, but would create a new, unique story of its own that would resonate with players to this day. Whether you enjoy the challenge of the puzzle gameplay or the adult themes and characters, there is something in Catherine that can appeal to anyone. So, have you played Catherine before, either the original or new body? I would love to hear about your experience in the comments below. As always, all links to all my sources will be in the description, and a big massive thanks to my friends Dustin, Lucas, and Haley for helping me review the script. This has been Twigs, and thank you for watching.